Okay, all right.
Okay, good evening everybody. Thanks very much for coming along tonight. So I'm Dene. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me later, but tonight is about emotional intelligence. So what I'd like to do is, first of all, just get a feel for who we've got here tonight. So as I understand it, you're mostly in the IT area, is that right? Is that everybody, or have we got some finance people or some sales people? If you could just get a coach. Anyone not in the IT sort of area? So everyone's sort of in that field, okay. Anybody deal with customers? Yeah, okay. Is there anyone here who doesn't deal with people? So everybody deals with people in some form or another. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Well, that's really what tonight's about, how we deal with people. So, having got that sort of clearer, how many of you have ever done anything or looked at emotional intelligence and got some experience of it? Okay. Of those who've done it, how many of you have gone deep? Who's the experts in the room? I know you are a little bit. Anyone else, or is it sort of just a little dabbling here and there? Just okay. So, emotional intelligence that we're going to go through tonight is rapidly, well, it's not rapidly, it's an established area. People understand it, and basically tonight you are going to experience emotion, and there's going to be at least 5 emotions that you will experience in this room tonight. Acceptance is one. So I'm going to tell you some stuff, and you're going to go, yeah, okay, I get that, I accept that, that sounds fair enough. That's an emotional response. Some of you might go from acceptance to joy. You might go, wow, why didn't I know about this 15 years ago? This is going to change my life, this is fantastic. And I'm not exaggerating on that point, because actually that's what happened to me when I discovered this stuff. Some of you might actually feel the emotion of resistance, and you might think, I don't like this. This will take me in a place I don't like, it's too challenging. Some of you might feel the emotion of denial, and you might actually be looking at me and thinking, this is bull. What is this guy talking about? And some of you might actually go into a place of almost fear, where actually I might be introducing you to concepts that are challenging you so much that you feel very uncomfortable about it to your core. There's a 6th one that I haven't put up there, and you might actually just be bored. It just might not grab you at all, and that is an emotional response. So, when you're sitting in however many meetings you sit in and you're there twiddling your thumbs, bored, that's an emotional response to what's going on. And the key that I'd like you to really think about tonight is just to be aware of that. So if you do experience those emotions, just try and note it, just try and actually acknowledge it inside yourself, because that's the first step towards emotional intelligence, is acknowledging the emotions that you have. And we were talking earlier about perhaps different cultural approaches to emotions, and for most of us Brits, we're pretty reticent about acknowledging and expressing our emotions. It's not something that we're taught readily to do. So, here you go, there's some pictures up there. What emotions are you seeing? Anybody?
Frustration.
Frustration? Shock?
Anger.
Anger? Any others?
Despair.
Despair?
Disbelief.
Disbelief? Yeah. All fairly negative. Anyone seeing any positive in there?
Relief.
Surprise.
Okay, all right. Well, actually, we can't tell right now because we don't know the context. And what's going on is that you are seeing those pictures, and those pictures are being processed in a part of the brain called the Fusiform Gyrus, which is in the middle of the brain. And it's a recognized area of the brain which processes our recognition of faces. But it also processes the way we use words, the way we process color, and also how we understand whether things form together in groups or not. So it's a fundamental part of the brain which actually looks at groupings. So how many of you do recruitment? Quite a lot. How long do you think it takes when that person walks through the door before you've made a mental picture or you've got an opinion in your mind about that person?
2 seconds.
2 seconds? Any other guess? 10 seconds? Any other guesses apart from that? Does anyone want to put anything else in there?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. It's about 0.3 of a second is the first reaction to the person that walks in the door. And that goes back to our primal programming, our evolutionary programming when we were in our caveman days, when if we didn't make those sorts of snap judgments about who was coming in to our cave, we could be dead. And that still exists. And if you're interested in that sort of stuff, there's a fantastic book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Has anyone come across that one? Have you all read it, or are you just familiar with it? So if you've read it, you'll know that we have the System 1, the fast-thinking brain, and System 2, the slower-thinking brain. And what happens is we are extremely good at recognizing patterns. So you may have a problem there. I'm going to put something up on the screen, and I'd like you to have a go at making sense of it. So if you can't see it on this one, there's a screen behind you over there. Who'd like to try and tell me what that says?
Hello and welcome to Pearson.
Excellent. Excellent. We have got the most fantastic problem-solving kit that's ever been devised up here. And what we do is we look to solve problems by taking cues and clues from what we look at. So when we see pictures like that, the brain immediately goes into action and it forms a conclusion before we actually know the context. So, you know, when I saw these, my immediate reaction was, yeah, anger, frustration, all those things. But then I started thinking about it and I thought, yeah, I've seen that before. Anyone seen the film Harry Met Sally? So I was thinking, yeah, that maybe comes from there. Does that look like real anger to you, or is that somebody pretending to be angry, do you think?
Or some cheese.
Or some cheese, absolutely. And you know, there's all sorts of interpretations that you can put on there. But what we do is our brain immediately tries to make sense of the picture that we see according to the way in which we think about the world, and we solve that problem. So today, what I'd like to try and do today is to tell you a bit about emotional intelligence, to try and give some sort of techniques on how to use it. But to get there, I want to look at a little bit about the history of it, but just a tiny bit, just to give you some context of where it comes from, and a bit about how the brain works, because if you understand how the brain works and where it all comes from, it makes it much easier to actually implement it and use it in real life. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think, what do you want to get out of tonight? Because if you've got a reason for being here, and you've got something that you want to get out of it, then that's going to focus your mind, and it's going to help you actually find things of interest. But also, more importantly, when we come to the end, if you've got questions, it'll help you form questions around it. So if you've got a reason for being here, just try and sort of get that into some sort of shape and focus and have an idea of what you want to get out of tonight. And then if there's questions, I'm very happy to take them at the end. So, ready for a joke? What's pink and fluffy? Any ideas? No ideas?
Candy floss.
Pink fluff. What I used to find when I was in the corporate world is that the stuff we're talking about tonight is always seen as the pink fluffy stuff of business. Yeah? It's actually called the soft skills. And that pisses me off. Because I guarantee if I were to go around the room and ask you what you did, that was the hardest thing in your jobs, none of you would say to me, actually I find programming the hard thing, or I find putting a balance sheet together the hard thing, or all the things that you're functionally trained in, you can do. Is there anyone sitting here today going, actually I can't do the job I'm employed to do? We can all do it, can't we? So what's the hard thing that we have to do in the work? It's dealing with people. And every time I ask this question, if I ask accountants, say, what's the hardest thing in your job? They don't say putting a cash flow statement together. It's actually how they sell the information that's on that cash flow statement to the clients that they've got, or to the managers that they've got. And it doesn't matter what part of work you ask that question of, it's always the same answer. So I'm on a mission to actually turn this not from being the soft skills to the hard skills. And that is my personal mission. You know, I want to get this absolutely in a place that it should be in people's minds. So let's put this in a business perspective and sort of try and give you some idea of what emotional intelligence actually does when it's applied in a business setting. So I don't know whether you can see this, but through the research that's been done, it's now recognised that 80% of the skills of the really top performing business people are in the realm of emotional intelligence. When it's applied, it increases the profitability of companies. It can reduce accidents in environments where safety is a key feature. It can reduce grievances. Anyone been involved in a formal grievance? Yeah. I got involved in lots of them, and again, they're highly charged, highly emotional, hugely time-consuming, would you say? You know, for everybody involved. And there's research to say that, you know, for people that have been trained in emotional intelligence, it reduces that sort of conflict in the workplace. Productivity gets beaten, and here's some specific examples of American Express, who ran a program and saw sales increase by 12.5%. Motorola got great productivity increases. And you know, this is research backed, so you've got research from the Harvard Business Review, blah, blah, blah. I won't read it all out. If you want it, if you're interested in it, talk to me afterwards, I'll happily send it to you. But this is hardcore research saying that, you know, this is not the soft stuff. This makes a real difference in the world of work. I don't know whether you can actually see that. This is just a representation of some emotions. How many of you have actually thought about the different emotions that you have beyond anger and beyond joy? Has anyone actually spent any time thinking about emotion? One? Anyone else? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, a few of you, but not many. And that's not unusual. You know, we're not taught to think about this stuff. But there's actually, in the English language, there's about 3,000 words that express emotion one way or another. And, but we're just not equipped to sort of bring that out and articulate it. And that's why I started off the way I did tonight, because it's only when you start allowing yourself to really experience the emotion and feel it. Emotion actually has a physical component. When you're feeling emotive, you can feel it in your body. So, anyone ever felt anxious before? Okay. Where did you feel anxious? In your tummy. Yeah. Would that true for everybody who felt anxious?
Shoulders.
Shoulders. Yeah. Excited. Where did you feel excited? Hands. Okay. But we get physical expression of our emotions. And that is one of the key things about emotional intelligence. It's putting that connection together that when you've got a physical feeling, it's a representation of an emotion going on. Now, this has actually been around since the beginning of time. So you've got this quote from Plato: human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge. And that was around about 500 BC in Greece. In China, you've got Lao Tzu: mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. Again, around about 500 BC. And then you have this one. I love this one. I don't know if you've come across this one before. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the view of throwing it at someone else, but getting burned yourself. So, who here has ever got so angry? I'm going to put my hand up at this one, okay? I'll start the ball rolling. Who here has ever got so angry that when they got through the anger, they realised the person they'd hurt most was themselves and not the person they were getting angry with? Yeah, great. Thank you for admitting that. That's a big thing to do. Because anger is still an emotion that we are a little bit shy about opening up about. I'd love to have been around 500 BC because I don't know what the heck was going on around the world, but all of these people were thinking around about the same time. There must have been some huge sort of movement going on about understanding emotional intelligence. How many of you here think that the words emotion and intelligence are just two words that don't go together? Yeah? Yeah, there's a lot of people who think, hang on, it's counterintuitive. How can you be emotional and intelligent at the same time? So, there's theories now of multiple intelligence, and these started to emerge. Who remembers 2002 World Cup qualifying, England versus Greece? We're 2-1 down. It's the 92nd minute. We get a free kick outside the penalty area, and David Beckham steps up. How many remember that moment? Just a few of you. Okay, it's a shame. I was hoping for a bit more. How many remember 2003, the Rugby World Cup final, England versus Australia, the last few seconds, and Johnny Wilkinson gets that moment in time to actually kick the winning goal? Anyone? How many of you remember that? A few more. Okay. Those were moments when this theory of multiple intelligence really started to come out into the public domain. Mainly around David Beckham, because people were going, how can somebody who can hardly string two words together perform an act of such amazing clarity to be able to bring his utmost performance at the time of incredible pressure? He's got 70,000 people watching live, millions of people watching on TV, all of his teammates, and he goes and delivers and scores that goal which takes us through. And they started to say, well, what is it about his brain that enables him to perform in that way? And this is where the theories of multiple intelligence started to actually come out into the newspapers. People started to talk about it. And it's now widely recognized that there's lots of different types of intelligence. Those of you who've done IQ tests, you'll pretty much be familiar with language part of it, the maths, the logical side of it, and the shapes, the spatial side of it, you know, if you've done IQ tests. But they now reckon that there is musical, rhythmical intelligence, kinesthetic, the intelligence of movement, which is where the Beckham and the Johnny Wilkinson thing comes in. But over here, we have the emotional stuff. So we have intrapersonal, the ability to look inside yourself and really be aware of how you're feeling. Interpersonal stuff, the ability to relate to other people and empathize. And this is probably what is most challenging to most people, the idea of naturalistic or spiritual intelligence, the idea that there is a bigger thing out there, whatever that might be for everybody. And this theory was brought together by a chap called Howard Gardner. If you're interested in it, you just have to Google it, it'll all come up. And he was the one who really sort of crystallized the idea that there is multiple intelligence. And as you can see here on this side, emotional intelligence is a key part of it. That was then developed further with this book. This is by Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman is widely regarded as being the godfather of emotional intelligence. Anyone come across him before? Yeah. Okay. If you're interested in this stuff, he's got loads of videos up on YouTube. He gives a good, emotional intelligence 101, and it's good watching if you want to get into it in a bit more detail. So that's some of the history background. What I want to do now is just talk a bit about the brain and how it works. And we know that this stuff is going on in the brain because of developments in neuroscience. So we can scan the brain and we can see which parts of the brain are responding and are having an emotional response. And the latest developments in this is that they can now connect MRI scanners in different parts of the world, and they can have people interacting with each other and getting emotional with each other, and they can measure what's going on, and it can all be analysed over the internet. It's just amazing stuff that's going on. So we know from that sort of scanning point of view, but we also know from a sort of biological point of view, because there's been huge amounts of work done on the hormones that get released when we have emotional experiences. So who's come across the idea of dopamine? Do you know about dopamine? So dopamine is the hormone that gets released when we feel like we've done something good, when we get that satisfaction and we've done something good and we feel great at the end of it. Oxytocin is the hormone of love and connection, and it's what actually makes us want to work together, feel good about working together, and it's one of the main reasons that the human race has actually been so successful, is because we have this hormone. But it also has other factors as well. So can I just ask, ladies, how many of you have had more than one child? Yeah, just the one? Okay, well, the reason that you had more than one is that flooded into you and it made you forget that pain and the horror that you went through and think, do you know what, it'd be really good to have another one. Guys, that was the hormone that flooded your brains and made you forget all the stuff that was going on, when you saw the baby gurgling and smiling at you, and made you think it would be good to have another one. It's the hormone of connection and love. Now this, I shouldn't really put this in a sort of a miserable connection, because we need adrenaline, we need cortisol. They are the stress hormones, they're the hormones that make us get up and go and recognize when we need to do something. But the problem that's associated with them is, in the world that we live in, we are constantly in a state of stress. And our bodies were only designed to deliver that hormone when the saber-toothed tiger was attacking us. And when that was gone, so the flood of those hormones into the brain and into the body would stop, and we'd go back into a state of relaxation. But nowadays, we live in a state of stress, and these are flooding into our bodies almost constantly. Whether you are struggling to get on the tube, get home at night, get here in the morning, you've almost got this stuff going through your body all of the time. And the body isn't designed for that. And this is why we get symptoms, or we get things like hardening of the arteries or stress-related diseases, is because this is just going on too much. And these are all as a result of emotional response. So there's three parts of the brain. There's the reptilian, the limbic, and the cerebral cortex. The reptilian brain was the early brain. So when we first came out of the swamps, that was the part of the brain that was developed first. As mammals evolved, we started to get the more complex brain. So in the reptilian brain, that's where we have the survival mechanisms, fight, flight, and freeze. The mammalian brain is where we start to get response, emotional response, where we start to feel the fear, the anger. And then the cerebral cortex is what makes us different. And this is where the problems start. Because, I don't know, if you've watched David Attenborough, you watch the nature films, and you can see animals bowling, you can see that animals like dogs have emotions. You know, they're happy to see you when you come home. Yeah? But they've got no attachment to that. If you've had a row with them, if you shouted at them in the morning, they don't bring that to the front door at night, because they haven't got this bit. And we've got this bit, the human brain, the cerebral cortex, and that means we think about our emotions, and we start to worry about. And that's where the problems start. So, why do we have emotions? They tell us what's going on in the world. They give us our reaction to the world. They are indicators. Our emotions are essentially there to protect us. You might not believe that, but that is what they're there for. I just want to talk to you a bit about personal growth, and then we're going to get on to a couple of little exercises, just to give you a feel for it. When we're born, we only have two reactions. We can make a noise, we can laugh, we can gurgle, we can do those things that endear us to our parents, and that makes sure that we get fed, we get watered, we get cleaned. Then we grow, we learn to walk, we learn to talk, and you can see that our experience grows. And as we get older, we build up rings of experience, which comes from all sorts. They come from our teachers, our parents, our friends, from the things that we've done, things that we've learned that work for us. And over the years, we just build more and more experience. And that represents our journey through life. But they become our prism. The way we see our world is built on our experience. So when we receive all of the inputs that come, our sensory inputs, they go through our prism of experience. And that raises a question, and that is, do we all live in the same world? So, are you all happy that that is the world we live in, a representation of the world we live in? Yeah? We can see South America, North America, a bit of Africa over there. We all agreed that that's the world? Yeah? So we have our friend over here, and she's gone through her experience in life. We have this guy over here, good-looking guy. And they both have their experience of the world. And the world has created their realm of experience. But that guy's experience is different to that girl's experience. So she has her prism through which she sees the world, and he has his prism through which he sees the world. And what happens is, because of her experience, she doesn't see that world. She sees a world which is a slightly different colour and slightly displaced over there. And he doesn't see that world. He sees a world which is being in blood, black and white really. You don't have the same sort of feel, but he sees a different world. Now it wouldn't matter, any one of us could be in that. None of us see the world in the same way because of the experience that we've had. So I want to have a little demonstration of this now. Is there any of you who don't agree with that statement? Is there any of you here who sort of think that actually we do all see the same world? Or do you accept that we see the world through our own experience and our own prism of life? Okay, I'm going to put an image up here now. Some of you may have seen this before. I'm going to put it up quickly and then I'm going to take it off again, all right? And I'd just like you to remember what you see. Now, if you've seen this before, don't tell everyone else. If you haven't seen it before, we'll see what comes out, all right? Okay, so can I just get a feel? Who's seen that before? Everybody! Okay. Is there anyone who hasn't seen it before?
I can't remember what's in it.
Sorry?
I've seen it before, but I can't remember what the other thing is.
Okay, so you hadn't seen it before.
I've not seen it before.
Okay. What did you see?
I saw what I perceived to be a lady with a feather.
Old or young?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Okay. What did you see over there?
I saw the side of the lady's face, and she had big hair, I think.
Would you say old or young?
I'd say young.
You saw a young girl. Okay. Anyone over here see the old girl, the old lady? But you've seen it before?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. What I usually do at that point, for the people who haven't seen it, is I get the person who has just seen the old lady to come up and try and explain to the person who's just seen the young lady, and try and explain the difference. And they never can, because when somebody can't see the world from your perspective, it's virtually impossible to use words to explain why you can't see that. So we'll have another go. How many squares can you see? So I'll give you a second to have a look at this. Got some answers coming? Sorry? 29? 32, 40? Anyone see more than 40? 36? 26. Okay, is that where it's all coming out around the same, is it? Sorry? 30. Okay, so 40 is the top, 25, 26 is the bottom. Okay. How many of you were counting that square in there? You know, and then sort of counting all around? Yeah. Did any of you count the square on the outside of that? Yeah, so some of you counted that. Did any of you count the square at the intersection of the crosses, at the intersection of the lines? So some of you counted that. Okay, cool. So any of you here conceptual artists? No? Okay, if I asked a conceptual artist how many squares there were there, they would count all of those and then they'd say, but actually I've got to take into account negative space as well, so you could double that number. If I talked to a physicist and said how many squares there, they said, well, how many dimensions are you talking about? Because actually now, we now think there might be an infinite number of dimensions. If I talk to a research scientist, they might get the microscope out and look at all the individual pixels that make up that picture. So what you see depends on where you come from. And when you come from different places, trying to connect and actually make sense of somebody else's world becomes a challenge. And that's where the juice of emotional intelligence really starts to come in. So what is emotional intelligence? So this is the model, this is Daniel Goleman's model, and it's about these four aspects. It's about self, it's about others, it's about awareness, and it's about the regulation of that. So we have self-awareness, and that's really where our confidence comes from, it's where our values, our beliefs reside. We have empathy, the ability to relate to other people. We have regulation and self-control. So the ability to manage our own emotions, and the regulation, it's not really the regulation of others because you can't control anyone else, but it's about our ability to create and manage relationships. And those are the four essences of emotional intelligence, or the emotional intelligence model of Daniel Goleman. So how does this show itself? So I said to you earlier, I was accredited in personality profiling, and the profile system I use is called DISC, and D stands for dominance. So it's how dominant we are in the world. I stands for influence, it's about how we relate to people. S stands for steadiness, it's whether we like to work fast or slow. And C stands for compliance, whether we like to obey the rules or not. So what does that look like? So, sorry this is small, but what this basically says is somebody who's got a high dominance factor is going to come across as being assertive, ambitious, driving, strong-willed and decisive. But if that goes overboard, and they've got too much of that, they're going to come across as being aggressive, demanding, bossy, confrontational. Are you picturing anybody that you work with right now? Somebody with a high influence factor is going to come across as being warm, as being empathetic, sociable, charming, persuasive. But if you've got too much of that, it could come across as somebody that's easily distracted, the shiny toy syndrome. They get bored quickly, they want to go on to something else. A bit glib, selfish, poor listener, they're the sort, they just want you to stop talking so they can come out with what they want to say. Anyone know anyone like that? And very impulsive in what they do. If you've got a high steadiness factor, you're very patient, you're seen as being stable, predictable, consistent, and a good listener. You really care about the people in your life. But actually, if it goes overboard, patience becomes resistance to change, you become passive, unresponsive, slow and stubborn. And people with a high C factor, they like detail, they're careful, they're meticulous, very systematic. But if it goes overboard, it turns into being hypercritical, picky, fussy, hard to please, and a perfectionist. So, imagine you've got all of these mixes in the workplace. So you've got this assertive, ambitious, driving, strong-willed person in the job, and they're in the same team as this person here, resistant to change, passive, unresponsive, slow and stubborn.
Currently, yes.
Are you saying that's me, or you recognise that in me?
Yes, yeah. I'm not saying that I am, but I'm
Okay.
working with someone who's.
You're working with
resistant to
someone.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all done it, yeah? So, this is the reality of what I was talking about, living in different worlds. Now, the reality is we've all got a little bit of this in each of us, but we all have a sort of dominant factor. Can you recognise qualities in yourself on either side of those spectrums in the different areas? Yeah? So, if you start to get a feeling for how you are showing up in the world by understanding the personality type that you are, and you can then start to recognise how other people are showing up in the world in the personality type they are in, it gives you an idea of how you might then start to work with them. And that's really what emotional intelligence is about. It's about understanding that just because someone is being difficult, it's not because they're being difficult to spite you. They're coming from a different place in the world. They have a different makeup to you. Different things inspire them, different things bore them, different things challenge them. They're just different to you. And if you can bring that into the way that you think, it gives you a chance of actually handling those situations much more effectively, much more productively, and getting better results at the end of it. And that's what emotional intelligence is really about. It's about getting better results. So how can we apply this? It applies in stress management, in leadership, decision making, team building, personal growth, all areas that emotional intelligence has an effect in. So, just talking about results, all right, and we'll get coming to the core of this now. Because in the end, what we're looking for, we're trying to be more successful. Whatever we do, we're wanting to be more successful. So how many of you think that the road to success looks like this? A nice step up. You know, we learn a bit, go up that curve, and then we have a little bit of a plateau, and then we grow again, we have a little bit of a plateau. How many of you think that life is like that?
Ideal world.
Ideal world. Real world? Something like that. And it's about the results we can get. Okay, sorry, that's not in a very good colour on this screen. But when things don't keep going on this upward path, when we get results which are not taking us on the upward path, the question is, what do you see at those points? Do you see failure? Do you see mistakes? Do you see setbacks? Is that what you see? So let's think about some things that have gone on. Who's heard the famous Thomas Edison quote, "I didn't fail 10,000 times, I just found 10,000 ways it didn't work," and then he went on to build a light bulb. Yeah, bit of a cliche. But if he was the type of person who saw that, would we have the light bulb today from Thomas Edison if he'd been that sort of person? We wouldn't. How many know the James Dyson story? Do you know how many times James Dyson went through iterations of his vacuum cleaner before it became? About 5,000 times. Right? You can't do that if you see failure. It's about what you can learn. So the question is, as you go through this journey, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on what went wrong, or are you focusing on what you can learn? And that's a key point, because at each of these points, you are having an emotional response. When things go wrong, you have an emotional response. You feel shitty. You feel bad. You feel stressed. What are you reacting to? Are you reacting to your emotions, or are you able to rise above that and see the opportunity to learn something and move forward? So I'd like to do a little exercise now and try and show you the difference between focus and concentration, and really try and demonstrate that actually when you focus, whatever you choose to focus on is the result you'll get. Okay? So some of you may have seen this before. I'm going on past experience tonight. I'm hoping it's not too many of you. I'm hoping there's going to be something new in this. For this to work really well, ideally, I'd like someone to come up who isn't stronger than me, who isn't bigger than me. And it usually works best with most effect if it's a lady, and a lady who doesn't go to the gym. So is there anyone who's like that, who would be prepared to come up and just sort of play with me for a little bit? No takers. Honestly, yeah? Fantastic, thank you. Rashid, thank you very much, I appreciate it. I'm just going to take a drink of water. Okay. What I'm going to try and demonstrate is the difference between when you have emotional content in what you're doing and when you can take the emotional content out and develop focus. Okay? I need to touch you for this, but no way of sensitives. Okay. All right. So, what I want you to do is just make a shape like that, everyone. Now, I'm going to hold you here, and I'm going to try and bend your arm up. And what I want you to do is I want you to concentrate with all of your effort and resist my force so that I can't push your arm up. And I want you to get that emotional connection. Think of, you might be representing the womankind against mankind. Who's stronger? You got that connection?
Yep.
Okay, so when I count to 3, I want you to resist. All right? If if it starts to hurt, then just tell me and I'll stop. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, right, just relax. Okay, did you really try that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You're okay?
Yeah.
All right, just shake it out. Okay, just relax. Have any of you seen this before? Okay. So what I want you to do now is I want you to make the same shape. But instead of having the fist, I want you to make a gun shape. Can you see that sensor up in the ceiling? I want you to point at it. Bring your arm down, just from the arm, just from your arm like that. Now, I want you to imagine that the bottom part of your arm is a laser gun. And the laser is generated at your elbow, comes up your arm through your finger, and it's pointing at that sensor up in the ceiling. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, what I want you to do is just keep that red dot of the laser on that sensor and focus on that. All right? So when I count to 3, I want you to focus on keeping that dot on that point. Okay?
Yeah.
So you ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you. Didn't hurt you?
No.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on. How did that feel differently to you?
Well, I don't know if you're pushing less the second time, but it felt a lot easier. Just,
No, I wasn't. I was pushing as hard. I mean, I didn't want to push too hard because you know there's more resistance there, and you know I don't want to hurt you. But you know I was pushing as hard, and your arm was not moving. Now you can all try this. You know, if you want to do it afterwards, it's great fun to do, and it works. And it's the difference between. It's about trusting your mind. Your mind will look after what you focus on. And it's the difference between concentrating, and I don't know if you've ever had this. If you've ever had a problem to solve, how many of you tried concentrating really hard on it? Think, I've got to solve this problem. Yeah? How many of you have ever solved a problem like that? Hands up if you have. I really want to see if you've ever solved a problem like that. If you have done, fantastic. Brilliant. You're 1 out of however many. You are unique, sir. How many of you have had that problem and woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and gone, whoa? Yeah, a few more. Excellent. Yeah, because what happens is when the brain relaxes, it's working and bingo. And that's what we just saw, a little demonstration of that. It's when we actually are focusing on what we want rather than on what we do, something goes on in the brain and we actually get a better result. And that's the point of this. As we go through our journey, if you focus on these things, that's what you're going to get. If you focus on this, you will move forward. Yeah? And that really brings us to the end of what emotional intelligence is about. Emotional intelligence is actually about the ability to take yourselves above your emotional response. Have any of you heard of a guy called Viktor Frankl? Yeah? Can I just get a feeling for how many of you? Okay, do you know his story? He was incarcerated in the concentration camps during the Second World War, and he survived when many of his friends didn't. And he came out at the end of it, and he wanted to know what was it within him that enabled him to survive that horror, but not his friends. And in short, there's a fantastic book if you want to read it. It's all about, again, you know, you just Google them if you're interested in that. It's easy to find. But he developed the idea, he said, between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap, you have time to choose. And in that gap, everybody, we all make a choice. Your emotions are a choice. if you get angry about something, it is a choice. Now, some of you may have triggers. One of my triggers is driving around the M25. What I really hate, I don't know whether you've had this, is when someone is outside you, but they're just in that blind spot. So you can't see them in the screen mirror, and you can't see them in your wing mirror. And you're just about to overtake, and suddenly they come out of nowhere, but they've just been sitting in your blind spot. It really gets me, and suddenly I go. But it's a choice. You know, something in those rings of experience that I have developed in my life have told me that's the appropriate response for that situation. So every time you respond or you react in that way, it's because your rings of experience have told you that's the appropriate response. So if you want to overcome those sorts of reactions, just remember, between that stimulus and how you respond, there is a gap. And in that gap, if you can recognize it, you have the chance to change how you respond to the world. And that is what emotional intelligence is about. So, thank you very much for listening.